Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the very first vBrownBag Build Day live streaming event. I'm frankly quite excited and somewhat terrified to be building a data center infrastructure live on the internet because, of course, everything that goes on the internet stays on the internet forever, and every mistake I make during this, including that one, will be analyzed forever. Joining me in this terrifying journey to building enterprise infrastructure is Richard Greenwald from HPE.
Hi, Alastair.
Hey, good to have you here this morning. And as we go through this process, I'm playing the customer who is deploying the HC380 hyper-converged platform that is the topic for our build day. And Richard is playing the role of the systems engineer from the partner. So I'm trying to be as stupid as I can. As you know, I'm trying to be me. So really, that's the same thing.
Oh.
And Richard is being the subject matter expert here.
Yes, I'll be working with you through this installation of the HC380, adding it to the existing data center, and I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. And just very quickly, what is your role with HPE?
So sure, I work in the technical marketing division of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I work on creating marketing material and technical training for our partners and customers, and it's not just the high-level positioning, but actually what are the specifications? How does it work? How do you install it? So this is really cool and working right with you.
Right. And one of the main references we're going to use through this is the installation guide for the HC380. Were you actually involved in writing that? I should have checked before I asked you.
I was not involved in writing that actually, but it's a very good document. It's available on the public website, so anybody installing this can go out there and get that. It is really a step-by-step guide, and we'll more or less be following that.
Manning all of the computers that are making the live stream work is Mr. Jeffrey Powers. I think he is carefully studying all of the streaming at this moment and is not going to put a smiling face up. There's a smiling face.
There's my smiling face. How you guys doing out there? We're just Command Central.
And then we have a couple of other people from HPE who are sitting in the background. So you'll see some video that we recorded with Greg Park, and he is, as there is an escalation for us as well. And he's told his colleagues that if we see him on video, it's because something has gone wrong. The other person I'd like to mention that is not going to be on camera, but is answering some questions on YouTube and Facebook, is Becca Taylor. And she is the person who has been the champion for vBrownBag Build Day and has really made this happen. And we're really grateful for her support in making this happen. Do share with your friends that this stream is available on YouTube, and you can see us also on Facebook. We have our Facebook page. Everything is up on YouTube. And of course, Twitter, follow us as vBrownBag. And we have the #HC380 Build Day as the hashtag for this event. So this is what we're going to go through today. So we're doing the introductions and outline. I'm going to run through what it is that we've got actually as the customer environment that I brought with me from New Zealand. Then we'll have a look at the preparation work. My customer that I brought with me doesn't actually have a lot of HP infrastructure deployed out yet, so there's some preparation work and some checking of the environment as well. We'll run through the initial deployment wizard that builds the first HC380 cluster, and then there's a second wizard that runs to put all of the management infrastructure in front of that. And those two pieces we'll run through. And then we'll look at this VM vending machine, which is a really important part of the HC380 solution.
It makes it real easy for a non-technical person to get a VM right away if they need it. They can select a name, a few simple steps, select a size, and it's going to be deployed right away.
So that's one of the really important features of the HC380. And then at the end, we're going to migrate on all of the virtual machines that I brought over here in my checked bag from New Zealand. And we'll have a look at the environment that I brought over in my Pelican case from New Zealand. But what you can see is that I've got a single ESX server here. This is what the customer has. It has only local storage, so the internal DS2 is a data store which is inside this DL360 sitting in a rack here. So you can see a collection of virtual machines that are being managed here through a virtual center. Being an old-fashioned guy, I quite like that I have vSphere client and vCenter version 6 in here, because the web client is still not my favorite place to work. In here, we've just got a small number of virtual machines. I've got a few Linux virtual machines running in here that just provide a bit of workload. We go through this, you may recognize, if you're familiar with my Auto Lab, you may recognize that the IP address schema actually is Autolab, and so the 192.168.199 subnet is what I build Autolab on, and that's what we're using. And you'll see also that the subnets we use for storage and vMotion match up to Autolab. So I built it using Autolab and then used that just as a foundation. Just a small collection of virtual machines. It's a really pretty lightweight environment because I had to bring it over here on an Intel NUC, and it doesn't allow me to run a lot of virtual machines.
No, but it represents the existing customer environment and that you can migrate it over, which is great.
Yeah, and one of the important things that we wanted to do in this was treat it like it was a customer who had some sunk investment in their vSphere environment and wanted to bring that across. Now, that's not always the way that you deploy HC380.
Correct. So it could be deployed just as a standalone environment. It's got integrated vCenter on it if the customer wanted to use that. They don't need a separate software. In this particular case, it doesn't have to be, and we have a remote vCenter, and we can still use that, migrate our existing VMs over if we have a sunk cost involved in that.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a good time to look at the configuration you get on this HC380
Sure.
when it comes from the factory.
If you just buy this standalone box, it comes on the HPE DL380 Gen 9 server. You get everything you see here, the storage, the networking, the compute power. But you get all these different software VMs on there as well, pre-integrated from the factory. So you have one view, but it's not what you would directly interface with in deploying and managing these VMs. You have integrated ESX, the store virtual to manage the different storage nodes, but you have a couple other things that you do interface with. So one of the first ones we're going to use during the setup process is OVIO, or One View Instant On. It's a setup for the deployment. We will go through, I would sit down with you as a partner, go through kind of like a pre-deployment checklist. We can gather all the necessary information and we will enter that in OVIO, and that helps us set everything up. During this setup process, we will use the integrated VMware vCenter, and in this particular case, HPE has a OneView for vCenter plugin, or OV for VC. We're going to be using that, but at the end user, if they just want a simplified VM vending experience, we have the HC380 management user interface, and we'll be talking about that later today. But a customer can just go in, select, I want a new VM, add a name, network, OS image, select small, medium, large, and it's going to be deployed.
A couple of things that are interesting in here. So we have vSphere is the thing that you will see when you boot this. So if you attach a console to it, it's an ESXi server. And the storage is what's currently called Store Virtual.
Correct.
What I recall as the left-hand VSA, so the iSCSI-based scale-out storage solution. It's been around for quite a while and has acquired a few features over time. Mm-hmm. And that's what provides us the scale-out storage cluster that's part of a hyper-converged solution.
Correct.
But every node has that, as well as having the pieces to be the management of the entire infrastructure. So you have that vCenter server, and the management appliances are all on each node.
Exactly. So then it doesn't matter which node you plug into when you first start the deployment. You can just pick one. It will become the C node. It has everything you need already there. And through the OVIO tool, we'll give it the addresses of the other nodes. It will go out, contact them, and continue the setup process. But you don't have to remember where you put it in the rack or which one was there. It's all already there.
And then, of course, afterwards, that seed node isn't special. It's just another node.
Exactly. So once we start with that C node, it will contact the other nodes. It will spread the storage across everything, so it is transparent. If one node were to go down, it doesn't impact the customer. So there's nothing special about it after the initial deployment.
So one of the things that we found as we ran through a dry run, so Jeffrey and I have been working here with Richard and Greg for the whole week. And of course, we ran a dry run so that when we hit the roadblocks that those of you who've done these projects before know are inevitable, they wouldn't make the stream go very quiet for a while. We wanted to make sure that we found those roadblocks before this. And I think that the biggest roadblock we had was the fact that I didn't actually do any planning.
So we would sit down with you as a customer and do the planning of, okay, it's an existing data center. We want to migrate that over. So that is certainly part of an actual deployment every time. And that type of information goes into OneView or OneView Instant On, and that eases the transition.
The other thing we hit was we were doing a lab build and not following best practices around segregating our storage and management networks. And that caused us an issue, and we had to actually put our big boy pants on and do it properly. And then everything ran really nice and smoothly once we committed to doing it properly.
We stuck with it. We had the escalation process in place. We had certain experts. They got us through it, and we did get the deployment out.
Yeah, and we still, I think we started at about lunchtime on Tuesday to do that build, and we got the builds progressed through on Tuesday. It's not like it took us from Monday at 9 a.m. to do the dry run until Wednesday evening.
Correct.
We got through that, and yesterday we were pretty comfortable that this is going to run nicely today. A couple of pieces in this that we're going to do. So the first thing is that most customers that are deploying HC380 are probably existing HP customers. And they will have the HPE management portfolio in place. They've probably got full OneView and OneView for Virtual Center, but I wanted to show that deployment as well. So most customers deploying this will already have the OneView plugin for vCenter.
For vCenter, correct.
And what's the value of that plugin in very brief?
You'll get all the benefits of HPE OneView, but if you wish to manage from vCenter instead of the OneView appliance, you get all the same benefits, but it helps our customers manage as they feel most comfortable.
And it gives lots of visibility of the HPE features inside the vCenter interface you're used to.
Exactly, correct. So in this particular case, you're going to show the installation of that. That's great. We can install that and then also migrate that vCenter over to this new cluster to manage the entire environment.
The first thing I think is we need to actually find these downloads, because one of the challenges often is on an enterprise site. Where are they? Finding the downloads.
But we're going to get them all, and we're going to have them available for this audience after the fact.
Yes, so we'll put some short circuit links in, but of course that only helps you find the HC380 information. If there are other HPE products you're working with, then you'll need to go and find those as well. I just go to hpe.com as my naive first way of finding things, and I think we actually found that to be quite effective the other day as we wait for the intertubes and we hit the support site, and we're going to head into the downloads section. There we go, HPE servers, storage and networking, and then I'm going to do the product search for the HC380. Now, one of the other ways I found these support resources is to go to my favorite support tool of Google.
Right.
And say, Google, I want the installation guide for HPE HC380, and it took me straight to the download page, and I like that. HC380, interestingly, hits quite a lot of different HPE products. So I just put Hyper to get the hyper-converged product in.
Correct.
So this is the flip side of the wonderful thing of having so many different products in the portfolio, is that there are so many different products in the portfolio.
There's a lot of documents to sort through, but
so I head on into the software and firmware, driver software and firmware link.
A quick shout out to Alan Himes, who basically said the checklist is the most important thing. So he's just also reiterating what Greg Park, excuse me, only one. Greg Park is also on. He's tweeting in the chat room on YouTube.com. vBrownBag.
Nice to have some people following along and offering their feedback as well. And in here, there's a variety of things that we need to download, and it's this OneView for VMware vCenter is the first one we're going to use, and that's the one that gets us that integration that most customers will already have deployed.
Correct.
And the other one we're going to use is this hyper-converged validation tool. What's that one about?
So this is a great tool that we run before the deployment of these nodes. It actually goes out, it checks a couple things. It checks that each node can communicate to the top of rack switch. It checks that all the nodes have the same storage configuration. The storage has to be the same across all the nodes we deploy, whether it's 2 nodes or up to 16 nodes. We need the same number of drive blocks. It's going to check that before we get too far along in the deployment process. If anyone ever had to do a reset, this validation tool would also check that the reset was done correctly. And this is pretty neat because it's happening now at the beginning of the deployment process. We could go back and do it again rather than once we spend a lot of time and get 90% of the way through.
I've pre-created a virtual machine that we're going to use for the OneView for vCenter install. So I'm just going to minimize out all my other windows, and I'm going to open an RDP connection up to my OneView for vCenter machine. So it's just a Windows machine. There's nothing particularly special. It was what did we decide for the config for this one? One CPU, not
Small
very much
config,
RAM.
but that's fine. It serves the purpose of an existing Windows machine.
And it's just a conduit. Now, the reason I've had to do a separate Windows machine is that my vCenter server is the appliance. This would normally be installed on the vCenter server, I imagine, for most deployments. Through the magic of TV, I've pre-downloaded the installer, and we'll just run the installer now. Away we go with install anywhere. And so, say existing customers already have this. Is there any particular driver to having more recent versions, keeping the versions up to date on there?
It would be good if you had the more recent product releases, the newer software releases will cover those. If there's any known existing bugs, it would address those as well. So
it is in that normal lifecycle management of management tools that you do need to keep them up to date. And then it becomes a very normal Windows software install. Click continue. Say yes, I realize this is all about managing HP products. Yes, I agree to be Meg Whitman's butler for the next 5 years. I'm going to do a custom install just to show some of the things. Yes, I agree to be Richard's butler for the 4 years following Meg Whitman's butler service. And this is the particular one I wanted to hit, because one of the issues that we had during the dry run was that this was a vanilla 2008 R2 install, and so the firewall was turned on. We have a collection of ports in use here. We can change those, can't we?
So if the firewall's on, it can cause problems later on, and this is one of the issues we hit, but we're going to turn the firewall off, leave the ports on. So
we've left the firewall off on this machine, but you could equally, if your security policy required it, you could just pinhole this consecutive ports, because it is just a set of consecutive ports. It's 3500 up to 3511, so you just have one port range opened up. Okay. So it's pretty easy. Yeah. Oh, hang on. No, I've chosen the wrong option. It said no, we don't want to import a database because we don't have one. And then vSphere users. There's ways to restrict who can use OneView for vSphere. That's interesting.
Okay.
Do you think there's a use case? Where do you think customers would use that restriction?
Depending on different roles in an organization, I'm sure there's others that we could explore as well.
Okay. But of course, you don't get that option if you do the typical install. Then we need to tell it where our vCenter is. So it's on lab.local. Username. So I'm going to do all of the interactive things using a user ID of VIAdmin.
Okay. So
we can see that. And then I'm going to use the administrator account to do all of the things that are the HP integrated tools.
Okay.
So administrator at vSphere.local. And now to show that we've actually put the right vCenter server in, we check the certificate, and of course if we had a proper trusted certificate PKI in place, then we get good certificates, but we're using the self-signed. Install summary, and we just say go do it. Now this install takes a few minutes to complete, 5 minutes.
We're back, and that showed the unboxing of a single node of an HC380. The minimum configuration is 2 nodes, so you'd have 2 times that for the smallest configuration. If you can go up to 16 nodes if you had a large HC deployment. Now that's if you ordered an individual standalone package. HPE offers a lot of factory express work where we can work with the customer. We can see exactly how many they want. We'll actually pre-rack it, pre-cable it, pre-power it to fit into their data center. And this just takes a lot of the work out of doing that. So that when it arrives at a customer site, they can just put it in and start connecting and powering it up to their own network and power.
That's one of the really cool things, because as we'll see in one of the other videos that we did with Greg Park, the deployments often are a cookie cutter going out to multiple locations. He talked about a manufacturing organization that send an HC380 cluster to each plant.
Exactly, and so that may not have a full data center staff, but they can be configured and make sure it's consistent to go out to each one of those individual plants.
All right, and you can see that the install of the OneView for vCenter is completed. and I'm just going to come in and say I don't really want to see the documentation, but we can just close the installer out. Now this is one of the places where we hit that issue with the firewall as we're doing the deployment, so I want to verify that the OneView for vCenter has deployed correctly. I'm going to open up my browser and I'm going to completely close it just to be sure. We struck an issue where you have to close the browser before the web client actually identifies that the new plugin is installed.
Not just
that confused the heck out of us because we thought we just needed to close the web client tab.
Yes, not just the tab, it's the actual close the whole browser.
Yeah. So I'll go back to my vCenter server here and log in with my VI admin account. And the way that we see that the OneView for vCenter has deployed is that there will be a plugin and there'll be a couple of HPE logos in the home page here when it eventually loads. Web client being a web client, it takes time. And in this case, that's a good sign because there's a download, as with all plugins, there's a download to the client device to show us that HPE component, the plugin. And there it is. You can see that we have an HP Management Assistant icon in here and an HP Infrastructure icon.
Correct.
And if I look now at my ESXi server, because it's an HP asset, I get some HP management information here on the front page of it. So the HP management here will populate up, and eventually it'll populate up. Now I don't have a full OneView deployment here, so there's a limited amount of information in there. And of course, most customers are going to be deploying OneView for visibility across the assets, but that's not our focus. We may come back and talk OneView another day.
Okay.
So now that we've got OneView for vCenter installed, what's our next step?
We're going to go in and actually connect to the seed node and run the validation tool.
So normally an engineer would turn up with a laptop and plug into the back of the seed node.
Correct, and that's certainly one way to do it with the second port on the back. However, and that's documented in all our install guides, in this particular case, you have the networking already set up. So you can use a jump server and RDP into that server from right here, and that's certainly an easy way to do it.
So I've put an additional IP address on my machine so that it's on the same subnet as this standard IP addressing. So this 42.100 is standard across all the nodes. It's exactly the same on everyone. And
that's in the install guide. You will set your static IP. You go to that particular IP. It will connect to that seed node.
And then the password for this is documented in that same install guide. And hopefully I typed it correctly this time because I've not been having a good hit rate at typing my passwords right. Looks good. So it's a Windows Server 2012 machine. And we pop across to the desktop, it auto starts
OVIO, correct. So this is one way to do it. However, we want to make sure to run that validation tool, the network validation tool in advance. So, and we have to copy that over from the download we initially did. So stop this.
Close the OneView installer.
And it's available on the desktop, so when we resume this, we'll just double click it and start again.
So we should be able to find it. I've saved it into my downloads folder on this machine. And through the wonders of RDP, I have access to it. So I'm just going to copy it onto the desktop now and expand that. So this is the file that we downloaded from that same download site where we got OneView for vCenter. This is the validation tool here.
Correct.
And we're using the publicly available validate tool that's currently up on there.
The current version that's up there.
Is it likely that there's a newer version that I could possibly talk to my support engineers around?
Depending upon configuration, we can get another version here. It does check a few more things, but this is also a great way. It checks all the network connectivity and everything I said before.
Okay. So we're going to open the validator. Gee, I think I need to extract the validator, don't I?
Yes, it is a zipped folder.
It's extracted. And in here we have a batch file that we run that then launches the PowerShell script behind it.
Exactly. So we're going to go through, it's kind of a guided wizard. We're going to click yes. Let's go out and just search the other servers that it's connected to.
And we can see the IPv6 discovery going on, which is very usual for a hyper-converged solution to use that for node discovery.
And in a second here, we're going to get a menu with different options that we can go through, for example, to check the networking. And if it does produce an error, it's okay. We can go fix it now. Maybe it's just something's not plugged in straight, but maybe a setting is not what is expected here versus on the switch. We can go configure that now. It's not a big loss yet in terms of invested time, but this tells us now.
So this is a really important part of our discovery phase. While it's doing that, so this is the OneView instant on component that we're RDP connected onto. So this, when we talk about the seed server and we're RDP'd on, that's a component in here, isn't it?
For the OVIO?
Yes.
So yes, the OneView instant on, we're going to run that in a second, and that's actually, but that's after we complete this network validation check. The OVIO is the guided process where we're going to take our pre-installation check sheet, and we're going to enter in all the IPs for ILO, for vMotion, everything, and that's going to go in and configure the system. So we're going to start that in just a second.
Right, and in the deployment guide, the installation guide for the HC380, there's a couple of pages where it says make notes of this information of IP addresses and things.
Exactly, and that's essentially what we're doing with the checklist. Now we have an Excel spreadsheet that you'll be posting online as well.
We do.
And it's just a collection of all those IP addresses. We verify they're not being used by anything else in the environment. And it also just collects everything in one place. So you can go through the install guide. It's all there as well, but this is just another alternative.
So this is our spreadsheet filled in with our numbers, and this is what I'm actually going to post for other people to download and use. And it really is just centralization of all of this information.
Exactly. So,
and so I'm just scrolling up to the top of it.
So this is something we would have sat down and discussed for your particular networking environment in advance, number of nodes, ILO addresses, and it's just all there, and it simplifies deployment.
Right. So we're going to be referring back to this document fairly regularly through the deployment.
Correct.
So it's important to gather this ahead of time. So if we go back into our, though we didn't need the OV for VC anymore, so we'll close him. Go back into our node where we've got the validation tool, and we'll run the network.
Click network, yes.
And the ESXi credentials are, these would have been reset when it was deployed, won't they? These will be the standard one. So now it's going out and connecting to the ESXi installs. And then we have,
if we go
here,
exactly,
we scroll down in our spreadsheet.
So it's asking us for the information about this deployment, and this is where we know exactly where it is. We don't have to go say what was that IP address. It's all right here.
And of course, if the customer has a good, robust IP address management, that's going to help us to fill these numbers in.
Absolutely. That's if that's all collected and together, that helps manage as well.
So we've got no VLAN. Our starting IP address is 192.168.199.11. vMotion is not on a VLAN. There's our vMotion addresses. They are 172. I wonder if I can cut and paste that. Look at that. I can paste, but we did find that it doesn't like a trailing space.
It may grab an extra character, which is something to watch out for.
Yeah, that's Excel wanting to insert an extra character. And then I use just one number off on the octets for the storage network.
Okay.
So what's it doing at this stage?
So top of rack ping test, it is making sure that all the nodes can actually go and connect to that top of rack switch. What if it can't? What if there's a misconfiguration? This would tell us here. And we're going to wait till we actually get all 4 green circles, and that'll tell us that this stage is completed. And if not, it will tell us what it's expecting or what it didn't find, and we can go address that. Exactly. And then we can address them. We can call them to everyone's attention just in a passing, and you see here we got all the green circles. So we can go ahead and click the back on we can review everything.
I was just going to scroll down all of these checks, just seeing the number of checks that are done in here. And you can see them in different phases. So there's one of these for each of the segments in that green circle.
Exactly.
Oh look, green circles. So I guess we should
Excellent.
do the storage.
Yes, let's go for storage next.
And what are we looking for here?
Again, are all the configurations between the nodes the same? That has to be consistent between the nodes. If somebody had were combining two different hyper-converged deployments, some had the 2 drive blocks and some had 3, it would give an error, and it will just trim it down to the smallest common denominator, which is fine, but we would like, if we have the extra storage, we'd like to use it.
Right. So that's going to trigger up and say, well, it's a mismatched configuration. Do you really want to
Exactly.
carve off a piece?
And this could
Do you
tell
wanna
us
buy
here
more?
now, or we could say, oh, and sometimes these are distributed across a rack, a data center, or something. They're not. Oh, if they're not right together, this could be very helpful in terms of to replace a visual check.
Again, plenty of detail on what's been checked in there and that everything is successful. What about the audit? Should we do an audit?
Yes.
And what's the audit about?
It's just going to check final configuration before OVIO starts. So we're going to check that everything is configured properly.
So that means we've got all green circles. That's got to be good.
So excellent. So this is the value of this tool. In this case, it's all green. If we had an error in actual deployment the first time we were running it, it would tell us here. We could go fix a network issue. We could go say, hey, the storage is mismatched, or what if there's a log file or something missing in the node for whatever reason. We can go address it here, and we want to make sure that all of those are green circles before we proceed to the next step. This saves us, because if these are all green, everything should go well after the fact. If we were to skip this step, or we have an error here and we overlook it, it could mean that, you know, later on in the deployment something doesn't work, and it's just going to be an issue later.
Okay, so this is sort of the validate and check. It's the
Exactly.
Yeah, make sure everything's good.
And so now we're going to go back to OneView Instant On, which is there on the desktop. Now this did auto start before. We stopped it because we wanted to run this validation check, but we're going to go back into OVIO now.
So we've got, what, 5 license agreements to agree to in here?
We do, and we have to click each individual one. And
but the bottom 3 are all VMware license agreements that we're agreeing to. So the default in here is a local vCenter. That's
so correct. So when we were talking about what ships on the server before, it had that local vCenter. And if you're doing a standalone deployment, this is great because you don't have to have a separate environment. But it's not the end of the world if you don't. Or if, in this particular deployment, we have a remote vCenter. We've got a bunch of invested time and resources in that. We want to move it over. So we could do local here if that's what the customer wants, but we also have the remote option, and that's what we're going to end up selecting here, right?
We are indeed. I'm going to select the remote option, and then it'll ask me for the IP address of my vCenter server, and it knows that I'm going to want to use the inbuilt directory within vCenter. How did it know I wanted that? But it is the only one that's there by default. Of course, you could use other authentication in there as well. Management ESX, management VM ESX. What's this asking us for?
So this should be in the pre-validation spreadsheet for the ESX configurations.
So this is my first, there we go, management VM.
Yes, and so we've collected that before. We're going to take that information and add it into OVIO.
So that's a slightly odd naming for what is actually the ESXi server's management interface.
Okay.
I think Greg was saying some of the naming in here is interesting. And then put usual subnet information, gateway, DNS. And then although the license says evaluation mode expired, we're not actually using the embedded, so it doesn't care about that. It's going to use whatever licensing I've got on my existing vCenter. And you can see now it's gone out and talked to vCenter and populated in that license. That's nice.
It knows that it's there.
And of course, we're building a hyper-converged cluster, so we need to specify a cluster name.
Exactly.
So our data center is called vBrownBag. And where are we today?
In Houston, Texas.
In Houston, Texas. So let's have a cluster called Houston. And we click next on that guy. Look at that, we've found our 3 nodes.
So it found the other 3 nodes out there. We want to select that, yes, we wish to import these nodes into this cluster.
And now we're setting the subnets for each of these functions.
Correct. And so this is also in the installation guide if we had it. If the customer has a very detailed network mapping, they could just use it from there. But also we have it in this pre-validation worksheet, and we can just copy and paste from there. And this is where the pre-work, the discussion in advance really helps save on deployment time and ease. It helps the problems later.
And you can see that when I put in the first IP address, it told me what the last one is. So it's important that at deploy time you have consecutives.
Correct, and knowing what it's going to deploy, correct.
And then for the storage network, which is that second issue that we had where we actually put it flat because we didn't have a separate network for storage. And the installer has an issue with that. It's not one that's insoluble. There is a support, the support team knew how to resolve the issue, but we decided to actually go with a good practice and isolate out the storage network.
Correct.
Store virtual credentials, but I don't have store virtual yet.
Correct, but it is integrated in the box as we get it, so we can go through, add those credentials, and that way it knows how to log into everything.
But I'm creating the account here. I'm not adding an existing
correct
set of credentials, which is of course why I need to confirm my password. And then some more settings in here. DNS it's picked up off earlier entries. Name for our storage cluster. We're going to leave those defaults. Let's just leave those as the defaults.
So mail settings kind of interesting. If there is an issue, it can send a from mail and it send it to a certain email address. And this is the configuration step where we enter that. So exactly, sender email if you got an email from HC380, and we send it to the administrator.
Sending it to a distribution list of all of the administrators at vBrownBag.
Excellent.
And again, a nice summary. And when I fat-fingered things and made typos along the way during the dry run, which I'm stunned I didn't do this time, we got reds in here.
Exactly. So if there is a red, this is the summary step. It's pretty cool. We know to go back to that and fix it now before it will go through the install process. But we got it all. We have all the green arrows here, so we are good to go on to the next step. Yes.
And all of those settings are summarized here. And if you're documenting, if you don't feel that your spreadsheet is adequate documentation, you can, of course, screen grab these.
Sure.
Hit the deploy button.
And now it's going to go actually take all that information that we just entered and configure and deploy the 3 nodes in this particular case. So this is no more user interaction or requirements from us at this time. We're going to keep an eye on it as it gets down to 0, but we are good for a little while.
Excellent. So I think, Jeffrey, this is a great time. So we did get, Greg Park did bring up a point that you wanted to.
So no, thanks, Greg. Definitely. This is the OVIO installation process, and in that first step, one of the first steps, we selected 3 nodes. But we do support a 2-node configuration, so the issue comes up of how do you decide for a failover manager or a quorum witness? And so if you just had 2 nodes in the discovery, you just selected 2, there'd be another field that popped up during the installation process where you could enter the information about that quorum witness should one of the nodes fail in a 2-node cluster. In this particular case, we have the 3-node, so we were good. But it is something that you should be aware of if you ever are installing a 2-node system somewhere.
So now indeterminate delay has completed.
Excellent.
Excellent. So we have now an IP address that we can go to manage the HC380 side. We're really finished with the things that we needed this seed box jump host from. Correct. We can use a web browser just on our local management machine, my Intel NOC, for this. So what am I going to see when I go to that IP address?
So we're going to go in and actually start installing and configuring the HC380 management user interface.
This is the admin password that I set during that previous wizard that we saw ages ago before my lack of a route caused us problems. And so we can now go through and do that setup.
Yes. So we have several different options here, Identity, vCenter, Directory. We're just going to go through them one by one and configure them with our information.
So we set a DNS server address in here, being the first field that's not actually populated, and an embedded OneView IP address. Mm-hmm. So this is the, well, tell me why we have this.
So it is using OneView under the cover, although we're not interfacing with that with user interface here, but it does make the API calls through it, and it's the management underneath.
So it's kind of an embedded management component of the HC380.
Correct. And so we get to use the same OneView management software to manage the hardware, but The point of this user interface is it makes it easier to deploy the VMs. You don't have to have that specialization again.
Right. But this is not a replacement for having my own OneView server that I use for the hardware management myself.
Correct. This is separate, and this is for the HC380 nodes or clusters by themselves.
Right. And then if I come back into my spreadsheet where I did all of the planning, the identity component has completed its configuration, so we're going to edit into the next one. Well, vCenter access.
It's populated.
Already populated.
Go through there.
Trust the certificate because I have a self-signed certificate, and the password's already there because we've already been interacting with vCenter. And then the next thing we'll do is connect to Active Directory. Now it doesn't have to be Active Directory. If you're using another LDAP source, you could use that.
You have the choice.
But we're going to do Active Directory, and I'm going to connect to my domain control, trust my certificate, and then I need a base DN. Now, I personally find LDAP DNs can be somewhat confusing because they're very picky about exact spellings and names of things. And so I usually cut and paste into there. And my favorite tool for this is Active Directory is dsquery. I used to use ADC-edit and tools like that to try and find this, but dsquery is awesome. You just open up a command prompt on a domain controller and you say, yes, we had a power outage this morning. dsquery, and I'm going to look for a user, and I'm going to look for my own user, vIadmin. Now I'm showing that it has been a couple of months since I last used this. There it is. So I needed to have a -name switch to specify that I'm searching by name, not by GUID or anything like that. Okay. So now I have the full distinguished name from my user ID. Turns out I only need this first section here, which is my domain's distinguished name. So I need the DC equals lab, DC equals local, which I could have typed fairly easily, but I'm sorry, I'm a trainer by profession, and A, you can't shut me up.
No,
and B, I want to teach.
It's good to show, and that way they can get the information if it were different.
Yeah, and particularly I use that for a couple of other places where you need to find distinguished names for objects. I use it quite a lot configuring VMware View at times. So I'll do the verify on there. Need an account to connect with, so we're going to use our vIadmin account and its password. What roles do we want to give? That's what this is, isn't it? I'm going to go very simple and just let my vIadmin user, who is a sophisticated vSphere user, have access to the whole thing.
But if you had different layers within an organization, you wanted to restrict certain responsibilities, you could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, so the levels at this point are not hugely granular, but we can devolve segments later on if we were to choose to. I don't think we'll do that today, partly because we didn't do it on the dry run, and I haven't created the AD accounts and users that we would need for that. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to use, oh look, there's a search. I just typed the first few characters of my group name. I'm going to use the ESX admins group that I happen to know my vIadmin user account as a member of. And I'm going to give it an infrastructure administrator, which that's the God role.
Highest level.
What are the other 3 roles? How much do you get access with those?
It depends on the actual menu choices and whether or not you can configure sizes, things to that effect within the actual user environment.
Right. And I particularly like there's a read-only role. Of you can see what's going on, but if a change needs to be made, you need to escalate to somebody.
Okay.
That's a nice thing to have.
Definitely.
Click OK on there, and there's no waiting for that one. That's straight away. And then we've got our 3 nodes. So our ILO username was, now this was reset during the rebuild and doesn't match what I have on my spreadsheet, but the account was root, wasn't it?
Give that a shot.
And it was your standard password because you guys did the rebuild last night. And then we say that I have 3 nodes I want to manage through this, and they're all going to use the shared credentials that I set at the top.
Yep.
one trap I found, these guys aren't in any particular order in here.
Okay. They may not match the way they're in the rack, and right.
So I have according to the ILO IP addresses that correspond to the serial numbers.
We have to match those up, correct? It's not just one-to-one.
So I was going to go to one of the ILOs. 211 I happen to know is the first of the ILOs. Because you don't need to find the toe tag. You don't need to go into the data center and find the toe tag. It's standard ILO. And you can just come in here. So ILO's admin, not root. That's what I'm doing wrong.
Is it admin or administrator?
Oh, it's admin. It's admin.
Admin
Hooray,
worked
it
in,
worked.
okay.
Right. And in here, as always with an ILO, you have the serial number of the units, and that matches up to the serial numbers that are reported in the UI.
Correct. So
and after, again, me being at fault for causing a delay, you love customers. Wouldn't life be so much simpler without customers? So back in here, I need to go back up and change the credentials to admin and my password. And then I need to find the node with serial number ending in J8. Now, I went through all 3 nodes yesterday and worked out which ones were which. So in this spreadsheet that you'll be able to download, one of the first fields is what are the ILO addresses. So J8 is the 211 address. And so now I should have the correct credentials and the correct IPs for all of my nodes.
So when we're in there, we need to remove one view management from the ILO. Did we do that?
They're not a default part of the build. Login delayed for 30 seconds on 211, so we will go to 213 and take that account out as well. Yeah, so back here in the setup of the HC380, we are making the ILO the slave of the HC380 management interface, rather than actually using this to configure the IP address. So I have to enter at the top the correct credentials that are currently set on the ILO, rather than setting new ones in here.
Right.
So now when I click OK on this one, should all be good.
Let's give it a shot, yeah.
All right, so we've edited down all of those. The connect and the configure buttons have gone away from the discovery and the nodes, and we go submit, and away it goes to configure some infrastructure. Now in my testing, this ran for somewhere around 10 minutes. One of the other things we do need to talk about, because the support guys were calling us out, that we're not actually following good process because you can't see the install guide. We're not showing you the install guide. You should be following along the install guide. And so I have it here on the desktop, and when Richard and I were doing this for the dry run, we had the install guide in front of us, and we have a printed copy over here. The install guide I found by putting in Google HC380 install guide, and it was the first hit was the download page, so it was really easy to find. Yeah. But we will have the download link will be in the show notes for this event as well, so you'll be able to get it there.
And this goes through step by step. Anybody installing the process, it will show you what to enter, what to do next. So.
And this is the official format. The spreadsheet we've been using is one generated by engineers to solve the engineering problem of needing to centralize things. In the install guide are these pre-checks.
Exactly. They're all still there. And either way, it's just gathering the information in advance so we know what to enter into the deployment process.
So there's good information about gathering that, or at least good details of what you need to gather. And then there is the step-by-step process of installing and configuring the cluster. And these are the steps we've been following along without actually holding the manual in front of us. The first 3 to 5 times that you do this, you probably should hold the manual in front of you while you do it and be reminded. The other thing that's in here is, look, a troubleshooting appendix. Here are some things to go and do in troubleshooting, and without needing to go and call your friendly HP rep or your partner to come in and help you with this. Hopefully your partner's there helping you. But without needing an escalation path, there are a whole heap of resolution things in here. And look, one view instant on hangs during deployment. Maybe you should do some of these things, like ping all of the IP addresses. The guys in the back channel helping us today didn't hit us with the one they gave us earlier, which was name resolution, name resolution, name resolution. And this is one, if for those who worked with me 10 years ago at a small integrator in a small city in New Zealand, I always said the problem is name resolution. Even if the problem is not name resolution, the problem is name resolution. And that was often true. Now it's the firewall that's blamed for all of these things.
That's the first rule of name resolution, right?
Yeah, check the firewall. So a whole heap of really good information in this guide. At 136 pages, it's probably not something that I would print out every time I do one of these gigs, but then
once you get the process down, like you say, you don't need it. But everything we've been doing today is in here. Some of these issues are because of a power blip this morning or because we're in a lab environment. But the basic procedures of going through the validation tool, the one view instant on, the configuring, the management UI, this is all outlined in here. So it's a great resource. And again, once you understand the basic process, no, we don't have to follow step by step, but definitely have the PDF available.
Yeah, and I before we came along, I learned a little bit about how HC380 works by simply reading the install guide. And as the technical person, I don't typically read the marketing information about how the product works because that's aimed at my manager. But I often will read the deploy guide, and particularly I like looking at the troubleshooting section to see what can go wrong. Where are the weak points of the product are often really usefully identified in the troubleshooting section. Okay. And I particularly like when an organization that's selling a product will tell you, here's the troubleshooting, we acknowledge that things go wrong and here's how to resolve them when they do. Because things always go wrong.
We try to have the basic kind of steps in there to check, and certainly when the basics don't work, we have the support network as well.
Excellent. The configuration completed.
Right.
And what am I going to get when I hit the dashboard button?
We can go in and get to hit the dashboard, and we can actually see the user interface. We can start. This hasn't been set up yet, but we can hit the icon in the upper left. This is the dashboard on the side. We can see the different menu options that are available, from virtual machine, activity, images, and we're actually going to go through a deployment here of what it would be like to deploy a VM.
All right, so where do I start?
Well, did you set up the data stores?
No, we haven't got any data stores yet.
Okay, so we have to go do that.
All right. Where do I go to set up a data store?
Let's go for vCenter, actually. Okay. We do not do that here.
We did not use that one because the plugins work with the web client, not the .NET client, so I better use this one here that will want me to log in again. And we get the usual loading time for the web client. One of the notes that I didn't cover in the install guide is that it does include directions around the hardware rack and stack. So putting the rails into the rack and putting the server on and cooling and clearances and all of those other DL380 deployment considerations. And they are the same considerations as any DL380, aren't they?
Correct. The underlying hardware is a DL380, but the HC380 has that integrated virtualization, the storage management, the user interface. It's not on a standard DL. Now, yes, so that install guide, going back to that, it has everything in it. It's a complete guide. So you may not use everything if you're very familiar with the setup, but it's there as a reference.
All right, so where am I going to create this data store? Maybe I should look at creating data stores somewhere in here in the install guide, since the support team want us to remind you to use this.
Sure, let's search for that.
Where are we? We're in this management initial configuration, creating data stores. So we log in, hits through, we're going to go to hosts, clusters, find our cluster, and on the summary tab. All right, host and clusters, Houston cluster, summary tab. Do you think I still need to keep reading it, or do you think we can wing it and learn how to do it here?
In the interest of time, we can wing it and do it here, but the information is
I was going to say winging it hasn't done really well for me lately.
Tell you what, let's go through the install guide then.
So the install guide then says we hit the summary, and down the bottom we should see the plugin, which we've just seen that in it, and then we want the manage tab and HP management. So on our cluster, manage. Oh look, an HP management tab. So we've got our HP OneView information in here. Again, if we had a full OneView deployment, there'd be richer information through this.
You can take it in there.
But we're going to go Actions, and we're going to go Create Data Store. And again, while that loads, the instructions are to set a size and number of data stores, and then specify a RAID level. So it looks like it's pretty simple, and it looks like I've chosen one of the ones that I could probably have gotten right all by myself. So I want the Houston cluster. It's the one that's got some storage. I want some storage from Store Virtual. I'm going to create just one data store, and I'm just going to create a 0.5 terabyte data store.
Okay.
Network RAID 10 from the drop-down. Yep, that's the right choice. Next. Names. I'm going to call my one data store prod data store 1.
Okay.
Partly because that's what I did yesterday, and I wrote a PowerShell script that requires that name.
So we have to use the same name, and that's fine if your scripts are written for those things, but you can take that into account.
Oh, absolutely. I could have... Ooh. So vCenter already knows about prod 1, so it won't let me create a new prod 1. This is vCenter knowing about data stores and not letting you reuse the name unless it would see it as being a snapshot of prod 1 that it had seen previously. So my script, I'm going to have to change 1 to 2.
You have to change 1 to 2 in there. Okay.
So validating provisioning job, please wait. Validation successful. And data stores. And now we can see the rescan activity when the automatically trigger the rescan of the iSCSI HBAs on all the ESX servers in the cluster.
Okay.
And I better refresh. Oh no, create VMFS data store. So it's seen the LUN, now created the VMFS. And then refresh storage again. And I'm going to need to refresh just the UI here to see that change. And look at that, a prod 2 data store, 500 gigabytes in size.
Showed up. Excellent.
There
and all
it
the
is.
information we just entered.
So Alan basically said you want the cluster selected as it was done so that the data store is seen by all nodes on the shared storage.
So that was when we were the first page of the add storage, and because I'd gone to the HP management on the Houston cluster, it automatically selected the cluster when we went to that first page, so I didn't have to manually select it. But yes, if I had multiple of these clusters and that remote office branch office environment, I might have, or I will have,
right,
one HC380 cluster at each of my remote offices.
Locations. Yep.
Kind of important to create the data store at the right place.
Yeah.
Great, so now I've got storage. We were going to go back to that
Let's
vending
go
machine,
back
weren't we?
to the user interface. So now that we're in here, we see the different menu options. We can go through them, but we were actually going to go deploy a VM, right? But before
Yes.
that, we have to do something else.
What's that?
We have to upload an image because this is a new install. We don't have any images in there right now.
Okay, and I guess that's in the images.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
go ahead and click the images.
There
There's
we go.
nothing there right now you can see, so let's go ahead and click the add button.
And of course, I'm in as an infrastructure administrator, so I can do everything. Choose a file. This is a OVA, so Open Virtualization format, single file virtual machine. I've previously downloaded Photon OVA, so it's the VMware Linux distribution that they came out with for running their virtual appliances and containers on.
Okay.
So I downloaded this beforehand. It's a nice small Linux implementation that's easy to find.
Just going to upload it actually into this user environment.
Threw me the first time is suddenly the upload's complete and it's not showing me anything, but in a moment it will actually pop in and process that image as my recollection.
Let's give it a second. If not, we can go back to the dashboard and come back here and see if it refreshes
the screen. And there it is. Comes back
There
again
we
and
go.
does the processing.
Okay.
And now it's imported the whole OVA, validated the OVA, probably does all of those checksum pieces using the OVF tool.
Check it out. But now it's imported and we can use it.
All right.
So you ready to deploy the VM?
You know, there's another step.
Okay.
Because this is a brand new vSphere cluster. I haven't configured the networking on it.
We have to go do that.
I better configure some networking. So I need to create the port groups because on my existing ESXi server, if we manage networking, on my virtual switch, on the virtual switch with all my VMs attached to it, I got a bunch of port groups down here, and I need this bunch of port groups for my virtual machines. I've got VMs attached to all these port groups. So I'm just going to pop into my cluster and go and add on vSwitch 1 also, which is the one with all of the VM networking on it. I'm going to go in here. That's not what I wanted to do. You can tell that I'm more comfortable with a different interface. I need to do add networking, and I have a virtual machine port group on vSwitch 1, and it needs to be called internal. But of course, I also need that on the next ESX server in the cluster because I'm not using a distributed switch. So I'm going to go ahead and create another one for the internal port group on, oops, I need to create it on vSwitch 1, not vSwitch 0. My internal network, and we'll finish on that one, and add it to the third one as well, just for consistency. I want my VM to be able to move around amongst these.
We need to have it on all three now.
Yeah, it's kind of a good idea to have that consistency. Well, that was great, but I got 3 more port groups to create, and I don't want to do it this way.
Okay.
So back over here in the deployment machine, we've got PowerCLI available. And why is there not a proper start menu on these machines? And I pre-created myself a PowerShell script as one should. And it connects to my vCenter server. And actually I should change the user ID to being me, because I said everything that was done by me should show up as the VI admin account. And that PowerShell script just creates some port groups. So let's grab the text of that and pop it into this PowerShell command prompt. No, I don't want to join customer experience improvement. And paste my PowerShell in. Being vBrownBag, we like to automate all the things, and so here is automating and creating the rest of my port groups. Job done, much happier. Refresh network information. Nobody will be at all surprised to find that I've now got more port groups. These pod port groups exist now. Cool, so now I have my networks, we can go back into that creating a virtual machine that we talked about.
Excellent. And actually, can we go back to images real quick?
Sure.
Just want to check and call to attention that there are some restricted characters on the naming of that, so no spaces, no special characters, just good to keep it simple, and that way we won't have any errors going on.
So think about it as a Unix file system name kind of standards. No slashes, backslashes, question marks, stars.
And sometimes, yeah, if you're using those, just take them out, rename it, and it'll save us headaches later on.
Right.
So,
and again, the failures will show up in the activity view.
So yeah, we can go through all those. The activity view is a great way we could log in and see that, hey, there was an error with that, but now you see we are fine, and it had all the port groups that you added.
In fact, because of course we care about those for the network settings as well.
Exactly. So now let's try virtual machines. So we don't have any in right now, but let's say we wanted to add one. Let's give it a name. We can select the size. Now, there's a couple predefined sizes in there. As you see here, we haven't set them up. We can go into settings and change them if you want, if your organization needs special.
So fitting with this standard operating environment for the organization, we can set those.
You can define them there.
Yeah. So I'll make them a medium.
So, and we added the images, so let's go select an image.
Just type the first character and it sends up.
And the networks, which you added. Then scroll down, click add.
And he's away creating, running the creation of the virtual machine.
Right.
And of course, when we come over here in the vSphere client, we should be able to actually see that occur. Maybe not instantly, because this is the vSphere client after all, but we can see Jeffrey has now been created as a virtual machine. Yeah, we just created a virtual machine called Jeffrey, so we're not talking to you.
Oh, okay. I am now a virtual machine. Hello, Dave.
So
I should have called it vJeffrey.
So it is up and running. So you see that the steps were, and this could be used by an end user, a developer. We didn't need to go into vCenter if they wanted to use this user interface. Just a couple clicks and here it's up and running.
It's a build process on Rails for that virtual machine, and guest OS customization is being applied to it. So it's using standard vCenter guest OS customization. Away it goes, and our machine is online, and we can see its utilization of resources here in the console. Very importantly, we can see its IP address. because of course the end user is going to want to connect to it.
If they want to, right, exactly. They're not going to go through here. They can just go straight to the machine.
Yeah. Nice. And we saw exactly that machine here in the vSphere client.
Exactly.
I probably have to select. Oh, I need to refresh. Oh, that's recent objects. Let me refresh it this way and see if I can get the left-hand pane to show me Jeffrey. There's Jeffrey. Hi, Jeffrey. And there he is. Virtual machine is up and operational, and we can see a console on it. There's some characters in there that I can see because I'm nice and close to my screen. People watching the stream, you're a little further away from me, and so you possibly can't see that on the screen. It's one of the cool things for me working with this particular machine. I have a recent version of View installed, not View, of a VMware Workstation installed, and I do quite a lot of the management of vSphere through VMware Workstation.
Okay.
So when I just said open me a console on this new Photon machine, it actually gave me the console inside the VMware Workstation, which is a much nicer console for me. I like a native application more than a web. So that was easy. We could create more virtual machines.
Absolutely.
In their images.
It's the same process, the same number of steps.
And any OVA, any virtual appliance that supports guest customization, we could use with this. That's nice because there's a lot of virtual appliances around, and it's quite a convenient way of distributing a consistent standard build. Because that OVA could be a fully built machine. It could be the standard, I don't know, proto domain controller, not actually a domain controller yet, but it could be a standard machine, or it could be a standard Linux server that you need.
You could have everything in there, right, saved as the image.
And then we could set some policy. Can we set policies about a particular image goes on only on a particular size of virtual machine?
You might be able to. I've seen a lot of flexibility there. It's
Right.
It's not something that has to be done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have our VM up. So that's our first VM up and deployed on our HC380 cluster. We can see it both through the vSphere client for me as the vSphere administrator, but we can also see it and work with it through the simplified user interface if I'm the VM owner. I can even take a snapshot from
You
here.
can do it here and then, yeah, export it as you need. Into...
I hope we can control that, because I don't necessarily trust somebody who doesn't understand snapshots. And I could assign to a named user at this point and say, this belongs to somebody.
Exactly. So nice. If it were deployed for them, but...
And we could go on deploying more virtual machines through the simplified interface, but I think the audience is mostly going to use the vSphere interface rather than the simplified one. And this interface is going to be great for creating new VMs, but I got a bunch I need to bring in.
So let's work on that.
So what's my process for bringing those machines in?
We can go back to the other vCenter and we can migrate them over, or you can you mentioned also scripting them as well, right?
Yeah, and the other thing for me is I'm old-fashioned, all this grey hair, and I don't particularly like the shared nothing migrate to take, because these VMs are starting out on local storage on my existing AirSec server, or if I had a larger environment, I might have an older fiber channel SAN. Maybe what I'm doing is replacing a couple of older DL360s attached to an MSA array. It might even be a SAS attached array at a client site, and I'm migrating that workload across onto my brand new HC380. Okay. I'm deeply suspicious of the shared nothing migrate, because when it goes wrong, I would expect it to go really badly, messily wrong. And some of the reason I don't have much here is I've seen that happen in earlier products.
Oh boy, okay.
So I'd quite like to make the storage in the HC380 available to my server that I'm coming from.
Okay.
That seems like a doable thing, because it's just store virtual and I can attach to that. So I'm going to do that by first finding the manage. Oh, I'm on Jeffrey. I need to be on my old ESXi server and manage the storage. The store virtual uses the iSCSI qualified name as the access control method. So it's not, some iSCSI arrays use the IP address as the control mechanism for what can access the iSCSI array. Store virtual uses the IQN. So we need the properties of this, and we need the iSCSI name, the iSCSI qualified name of this iSCSI adapter in my old server. So I'm just going to grab that into clipboard. Hopefully I got it in clipboard. Let me try one more time. And I earlier had the CMC, the Central Management Console, for left-hand open, and let's go with this one because that's authenticated. And for anybody who's used the CMC and the left-hand or Store Virtual, this is very familiar. We come in here and we add ourselves a server. My server is called Legacy, and this is my existing server. And it's managed through my vCenter server, so I'm going to put my vCenter server IP address in here. Here's on .6, and then my IQN. And then I'm going to give them access to that data store. So that's one of the really great things, is that I can see that I have my prod2 data store is right here. And it's got the same name, or almost the same name, in the CMC as it has on the data store, so it's easy to identify the object. And once again, I have multiple places I can do management through.
Access both.
I'm sure there's another way of doing this, but I'm doing it the legacy left-hand way. So now the Store Virtual knows about my ESXi server. Now my ESXi server needs to go out and do a rescan to find the Store Virtual side. And yes, I have more devices. So I can see I've got a Starwind that I use for a backup on my machine, but we've now got the left-hand iSCSI. So the left-hand identifier is still there in the Store Virtual. It makes me happy because the left-hand comes from a brewery. I'm a fan of breweries. I like the occasional adult beverage. And then in storage devices, we should see a new data store. And there it is, Prod2 data store is available to me.
It's there and visible now.
So now my really conservative migration methodology, I can select one of my virtual machines and say I just want to migrate, and say I'm conservative. I'm just going to change the storage initially. And we're going to go next and say the destination storage is going to be my Prod2 data store. And storage vMotion kicks in and relocates my master virtual machine. He's not a huge virtual machine, but he will take a minute or two to move. Let's see how big he is. While we wait though, I'm just going to find my other PowerShell script, which was the migrate VM script. And you remember I couldn't use the prod1.
So we had to change it to prod2, right?
So that relocate has moved my virtual machine, so master is now on the prod2 data store rather than the local data store instead of the ESXi server. Great. So what I should be able to do then is migrate him again. And so this time I just want to change compute. And I'm going to push him across, and I'm going to do it to the cluster, to the Houston cluster, please. I got some warnings because there's an ISO that's not going to be available. That shouldn't cause any problems with the migration. My port groups exist, which is always good. And then we finish. And we count ourselves extremely lucky that the CPU types were compatible from my Intel NUC to this DL360 to the HC380 platform. All of them had the same CPU type, so the vMotion goes without having to set EVC types across the way.
Pretty good.
I was really pleased with that. Pure good luck. So now I've got an actual virtual machine that was from Legacy has come into the HC380 environment. Nice and easy. The thing that surprised me was that in my list of virtual machines, if I can keep the right fingers on, it just shows up. No matter how it came to be, I've got access to it through the simplified user interface, and now my master virtual machine is here.
So even if it were created there, you can still access it here. So
yeah,
excellent.
Yeah, both ways around work. So at this point, I'm going to pre-populate all of the data that I need to mass migrate my virtual machines. And that's going to take a little while. And although 10 machines is actually not terribly many, if I was migrating 100 virtual machines, and I'm not sure I want all 100 to go at once. Because of that conservative, when things go wrong, I would want them to go wrong small. So there are some good references online about using PowerShell job control to sequentially move the VMs.
Okay.
Even if you do a for each, it doesn't wait till the first one's migrated before the next one. The migrate task, they all kick off in parallel. So yeah, be a little careful. Now, this is going to take quite a while to complete. This is going to take maybe 20 minutes to migrate all of these virtual machines, and it's I think the performance here is limited by the fact that this DL360 doesn't have many spindles under it.
Gotcha.
And so the read speed is the limitation on transfers. The migrations are progressing. We're at, what, 27% complete on the migration, and or at least the bulk of the migrations, it's 27% complete. So we've got a few more minutes to go. Here in the web client, we should see some updates to tell us that those migrations are in progress, but I don't see them in the recent tasks here. I am again going to go curmudgeonly old school and use the old .NET client, since I'm still allowed to use it on this environment. It's a rare pleasure because most of my lab environments are now vSphere 6.5 rather than the 6.0, and so that's not an option for me to use this. So it's almost getting nostalgic for this .NET client. And of course, when it was all we had, we never thought we'd be nostalgic for it. We always cursed this client until we had something else to curse instead. So we should see the actual migrations much more clearly in progress in the .NET client. They're probably there if I did a proper refresh of my web client as well. So you can see a bunch of parallel migrations in play, all of the storage migrations, and the smaller virtual machines have moved along further than some of the others, or at least the first ones to be migrated. So some are finished, most are still in progress. We are pretty much close to the end. Once these VMs are all across and ready to go on the new environment, we'll see that the old ESX server is just empty and we could decommission him. And our migration is complete. So if you have questions, send them through to us on YouTube or on Twitter. If you think of those questions later tonight, if you think, oh darn it, I should have asked, send them through to us today. The recordings will be available on YouTube later on. We'll get the interviews that we've been playing up on there pretty fast, and then I'm going to be cracking the whip to get Jeffrey moving on getting all of the 4 hours of content from today turned into some segments that you might want to see.
Well, now that I'm a virtual machine, I think I could do that.
We should probably clone Jeffrey a couple of times so we can have multiple of him doing the work. Also, let us know if there are particular segments of what we've demoed over the time that you think would be really useful. So yeah, do bring in the questions. Yes. Richard would love to hear from them. No,
we can go through and answer any questions today, tomorrow.
There's one other thing that I did mention earlier that I wanted to talk with you about, because you work as a tech marketing engineer.
Correct.
And technical marketing is kind of one of those weird workspaces. What is it that you do? Can you drill a little into what you do as a tech marketing engineer?
Sure. No, technical marketing, it's an organization responsible for creating training materials, sales materials, but more technical focus. So it's not the high-level business case, but it does get into speeds and feeds. But this is exactly it, the deployment process. How do you go about it, from the validation check tool, the OVIO, the setting up the management user interface, the data stores. This is pretty much what we do, but we will do it with Greg, our pre-sales organization. So it's a good way to kind of get this word out to the technical marketing, to the technical organization, but then also it feeds into the customers in terms of the people actually deploying the hardware. What problems are they going to run into day by day? And so what user interfaces are you going to be working with?
Cool. And then what is your personal journey? So how did your career lead up to this momentous moment of being the technical expert on, or at least the front technical expert, because there have been plenty of others behind. How did your career bring you to be sitting in the seat beside me today?
So always liked building stuff and working on stuff. So I have a bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering. Started out as server engineering, actually building similar boxes to this on the hardware side, the layout, signal integrity, storage, those types of things. And I really liked it. I learned a lot from it. It kind of gave me the foundation to work on this. Wanted to do a little bit more, so I kind of transitioned into marketing. And that also leads directly to the technical marketing. It's not just, high-level business value, which is very important and we need to convey. But It's the training, the selling of this on the technical level. So it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I like what I do, and certainly have a lot of respect for the engineers who design this and work on it day in, day out.
Cool. And technical marketing engineer is some of what I do is technical marketing engineer for hire. So I've written training materials. So when you do the readiness for the SimpliVity training, you may recognize a voice on some of those courses.
That's you,
if Chris Buzzy hasn't re-recorded them all because he didn't like my accent, then there'll be training with my voice on it.
I'll keep an eye out for it. No, and
who doesn't like your accent? I don't know. That's crazy.
Well, yeah, there's all kinds of strange people in this world.
Okay, well they're strange then. So, got a couple comments on the chat here. Talking about the web client, and it was Alan that said something about the web client is needed for the OV4 VC to work properly.
Yes, all of the plugins that we saw. So the .NET client that I'm using here, because I say grey hair and get off my lawn, I find it more responsive to Vue, but there is no awareness of the OpenView for vCenter in here. There is no HPE logos anywhere in this, whereas across in the web client where we did all of the work with the actual configuration of the cluster, this is where I have the ability to do the HPE monitoring. I need to be on the cluster to do that. All of the plugin components that adds the additional HPE awareness stuff is here in the web client, and it's not available in the .NET.
Okay. No, excellent. Thanks for bringing that up.
But we still don't see those recent tasks of the relocates showing up, and that'll be a straight up. Oh, there they are. Refresh. Got to refresh at the top. So now my migrates, the last few migrates are showing up in the web client, and we're nearly all the way across. At least for the storage. I haven't yet vMotioned any of these VMs. They're still sitting on my legacy host. They're just using the hyper-converged storage.
Okay.
So we'll let the last couple come across. Last one is 91%. So grab my vMotion. So the next PowerShell is just going to be every virtual machine that is on that prod2 data store. Migrate it so it's on the cluster, or at least on one of the cluster nodes in the Houston cluster. So have all of those migrates finished. Well, let's have a look at PowerShell. PowerShell says we've migrated all of these VMs.
Great.
So storage migration is complete. So I'm now going to do the vastly quicker vMotion of these virtual machines. If we look at the summary tab for our cluster, we can see some workload is on there now. We can see a bit of CPU utilization, memory, and storage capacity in use. And really, at this point, we've just got ourselves a vSphere cluster with some storage. It's into that simple story of hyperconverged. Well, I think this has really shown what we wanted to show, was the deployment process. So we started with a bunch of virtual machines sitting on an ESX server that was a standalone ESX server, and we started with 3 nodes that had been reset to factory configuration.
Brand new, right?
I think the only step in configuration that we skipped was setting the IP addresses on those ILOs. Because, of course, from factory they're configured for DHCP, but we wanted static IPs on them.
But that's not a big change compared to everything else we went through. We brought everything in. We migrated the VMs over. This would be, you'd be up and running here.
So yeah, we went through that whole process. Very importantly, I think if this is the first time you're doing the process, is to follow the install guide.
The installation guide, absolutely. That does walk you through everything, but we went through it as well.
But I think there was a little piece around, we chose the most complicated way of deploying it.
Yeah.
If we'd gone with using the embedded vCenter and building it as its own separate silo.
Correct. If it were standalone, we wouldn't have had to go through some of these other steps. But you'd have integrated vCenter. All the steps are sold in the deployment guide. The fact that we had an existing deployment, it just adds to the complexity. But if a customer has to go through that in the installation, this would show them the basic outline of what to do.
All right. Well, this has been fun.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you could join us. And
Jeffrey, is there anything else we need to tell the lovely folks out there? I guess follow us and
follow us. I suppose I should turn myself out. Go ahead and follow us over on Facebook. Go ahead and follow us. Let me pull that up. Over on YouTube, just look for vBrownBag. And there you are on Twitter, on Facebook, and use that hashtag HC380 Build Day so we can find your questions and comments. If you like this, if you got a product that you want us to build with you, let us know, and let's get together. Of course, lots of podcasts. There was a podcast that was going on last night with Tim Smith over at vBrownBag. So check that out over at vBrownBag.com. And then, of course, all the technical documentation, which we have links up on vBrownBag.com/BuildDayLive for the HC380. Go there and you can download those, or HPE's website.
Yeah, there'll be a few more links added to the collection on that page in the next 24 hours. Links to the download page for the HC380 and the install guide. We'll make sure those are direct links if you need to go and read those. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Richard, for persisting with us and the whole team online.
Sure, no, thank you.
And
thanks to Greg, and thanks to Broth for coming on.
Broth for coming and spending some time with us.
We got a couple more videos. We're going to be talking with Broth tomorrow, and all that will be up on YouTube, vBrownBag's YouTube channel.
All right, I think that is the successful conclusion of the first vBrownBag build day, HPE's HC380. Thank you very much for joining us, and keep a watch out for futures. We definitely plan on doing this again because we really enjoyed it.
Excellent, thank you.